Thanks to everyone for tuning in this week. This is your host, Rue, with the Astrocast. We have a very special episode this week that I am quite happy to present to you. I just wanted to give a quick note that the audio quality is a little bit different this week just because we were recording on site for this episode, so not my typical sterile environment where I can control everything. That being said, I hope you really enjoyed this conversation, and we'll be back next week with another topic. Thanks so much, and enjoy. Clear skies.
Start. T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. All three engines burning.
Are listening to
1.
The Astrocast. Welcome back to the Astrocast. My name is Rue. Thank you for tuning in this week with us. Today is an episode that has been a long time coming. I've been teasing it for quite a few weeks now, and we finally managed to get this interview together. It's a little bit tricky getting together because, as we'll talk about, our club is a little bit off the beaten path from where I live. But today we are sitting down with the director for the observatory of the Charlotte Astronomical Club. And why don't I let you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, so my name is Rick Bassham. I'm the director of the Gayle H. Riggsbee Observatory for the Charlotte Amateur Astronomers Club. We are located out in Kershaw, South Carolina, about an hour outside of Charlotte's Light Dome, which gives us opportunity to have some nice clear skies, but relatively close to a major metropolitan area. I have been the observatory director for just about a year now, and I've been a member of the Charlotte Amateur Astronomer Club for about 4 or 5 years.
Okay.
It's been a great opportunity to find a club like this. Before finding this club, I always kind of treated astronomy and astrophotography as a solo endeavor.
Yes.
Where you drive out to a field in the middle of nowhere and hope a farmer doesn't run you off. But once I found this club, I realized that this could actually be a social endeavor as well. We can set up together in a dark sky location, and while we're imaging, chat about things and look at the sky, and it's just a blast having other people out here that enjoy the night sky as much as I do. So.
Definitely, and that's actually something I touched on several episodes now. Is just like what a special experience it is to have this kind of communal place where you can come and be with like-minded people. Because just like you, when I got into astronomy, I found it to be a very solo endeavor. I often would go and set up out in a field. Actually, mine was a church parking lot. I made friends with a pastor, and he said, no problem, you can set up here. And it was, I would say 30 minutes outside of the light dome. So it was more like a Bortle 5, just to a 5. So you could see the Milky Way, but very lightly. But I was quite happy because I was able to see it. But again, it was a very, very solo endeavor. So yeah, I mean, for me, getting out to that church parking lot was kind of my first taste. I remember taking a lot of trips out there by myself and, getting acclimated to my gear and kind of learning how it all works. But when I first heard about the Charlotte Astronomy Club, and I can't even remember where I heard it. I feel like I saw it on Google. Basically, I was searching around for different things to do in Charlotte and found the Astronomy Club. And then I came down for the training one day, which you had, and then me and you met, and we started talking, and we talked a little bit afterwards. And, I've made several trips down, and I'm very much looking forward to the summer season that's coming up because the nebula season, as it were, is quite a fun time to be down here, just like any time. But it was something that I highly encourage any amateur astronomer to do is join their local astronomy club.
Absolutely.
Do you want to speak on what it's been like to actually be the director of this observatory, and what all that entails that people might not think about?
Sure. Being the director of this observatory, and this is obviously a sample size of one.
Yep.
So I can't speak for any other observatories, but here, you have to wear a lot of different hats.
Yeah.
Everything from janitor and groundskeeper to IT administrator, it all falls under the director. We have to do training on our telescopes. We do that once a month for new members and give club members a refresher on how to use our telescopes. That's one of the great things about our club is that we have several club-owned telescopes. So, when people ask me, what telescope should I buy when they're new members of the club? I tell them don't buy a telescope. Come use ours.
That's good advice.
It is cheaper than Netflix. It's our club is very inexpensive. We have some world-class telescopes from an 8-inch refractor up to a 24-inch Newtonian. We've got several different imaging telescopes that club members can use to get started with astrophotography. It's a really wonderful club and lots of things available. But back to your question of, kind of a day in the life of an observatory director, managing the network infrastructure is a big part of it, making sure that everything is up and running, making sure that our club members can have remote access to their equipment out here, making sure that the facility is well stocked with soft drinks, coffee and tea and things like that, so that whenever you're out here on a cold night or a hot night, you have some refreshments available. And so, so there's making sure that we're well stocked. Toilet paper and
all the little things,
all the trips to Walmart, that kind of stuff.
And that's a bit of a long trip, isn't it? Because we're kind of out in the country here.
Yeah, it's about 30 minutes one way to Walmart. So,
okay,
not too bad, but not exactly around the corner.
And one thing you mentioned that I'd like to touch on briefly is just you had mentioned that members of the club need to have access to their own gear. So one of the cool things that a lot of astronomy clubs do is that they have private pads that can be rented out by their members. Yes. And what is that experience like here exactly? If let's say you're a member, you've been here for a year and you say, hey, there's a pad available and I decide that I, want to build my own observatory down here. What all does that entail in your experience? You actually have your own observatory here, right?
Absolutely. So really what that entails is first coming and talking to me.
Yep.
And letting me know that you're interested in having your own, either, just a concrete pad to set up on or a concrete pad to put a building on. We have two different, kind of price tiers for that.
Yep.
That the club charges for rent, if you will. And both are incredibly inexpensive.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure.
But if you want a building, then that is something that is doable. We have to get permitting done through the county and make sure that everything is up to snuff. But once you've established that you want it, you let me know how big of a site that you want, and then we start the process of getting some quotes from people to pour concrete, and if you're going to build the building yourself, or if you're going to hire somebody to do it, then that's still typically that's done by the club member.
Yeah.
Coordinating with me.
Yeah, of course.
And so it's their responsibility to pay the contractors.
Oh yeah, of course.
That's not something we do. But it is, unfortunately, we are also filling up quickly.
Oh yeah.
So we've got 4 acres of land here, and we've probably filled up 3. And so
it's just a matter of time.
As a club, we're always looking for ways to kind of maybe get some additional land or things like that. But it's not always easy or straightforward to do that. So
has the Charlotte Astronomy Club always been situated on this property, the observatory?
It is not. Actually, we moved to this location, I believe, in 92.
Oh, okay.
Either 92 or 94. I can't remember exactly.
Okay.
Long before I was a member.
Yeah, for sure.
Actually, before we moved here, our dark sky location was in what is now Ballantyne.
Oh, wow. So you couldn't have a club there. Not a good club, I suppose.
Yeah, so if you're not familiar with Ballantyne, it's one of the suburbs of Charlotte, and it is an incredibly bright location now.
It really is.
You're looking at Bortle 9. It is basically urban skies.
Yeah.
And, that is, but, in the early 90s, that's where our club was located. and that was a dark sky location at the time.
Yeah, it certainly was, because that entire area exploded in the late 90s and early 2000s. It was kind of where all the, richer folks in Charlotte, for a lack of better words, moved to. And now I feel like it's a more attainable area for lots of people, but it's definitely not the kind of place where you'd want to have an astronomy club. So why don't we talk briefly about, we've mentioned the Bortle scale a couple of times now already in our discussion. And just for those who may not know, the Bortle scale is a reference to the light pollution scale, essentially, where 1 is the lowest number, which would be, the darkest of dark skies, Chile on a mountain 3,000 feet in the air, and 10 is, the middle of Manhattan on a bright night in Times Square. So one of the big advantages that I have found as somebody who does live in, the suburbs, and unfortunately my significant other has zero interest in moving out to the country. One of the reasons I find this place so special is because we do have such really cool dark skies out here. So can you tell us what Bortle we are actually in here at the observatory?
I'm not sure exactly what the Bortle number is. It would have to be, I would say we're probably a 4.
That's what I've seen too on lightpollutionmap.info, I believe.
That feels about right. It
Yeah.
really depends on the night, on how much particulate matter is in the air that's reflecting the light dome from Charlotte, things like that. If there's little ice crystals in the air, we can easily climb to a Bortle 7. But on a nice clear night, I'd say we're probably around a 4, which isn't too bad for the East Coast.
No, I don't think a 4. Frankly, the first time I came out here was actually a really nice night, if I remember correctly, and I was kind of shocked at how well you could see the Milky Way.
You can see the Milky Way naked eye. You can make out M31, the Andromeda Galaxy naked eye. Satellites are easily visible as they go overhead.
For sure.
It is, every night, if you're looking up, you'll see at least a couple of shooting stars.
Oh, yeah.
It's you don't have to wait for a meteor shower to see them. It's, we have dark enough skies that just the little pieces of dust floating by.
And most people have a camera recording at all times down here, in my experience, right?
Yeah, and we've got several all-sky cameras that are, getting a 180-degree view of the sky. And so that gives us a nice way to kind of see cloud cover and the sky itself over time, which is really great.
I can remember one night I was down here and I saw just an incredible fireball that came over one side of the field here, and it actually lit up the sides of the buildings. You could see like the building was white here.
You could see shadows.
It was so bright. And I remember getting on our Slack channel, which we have a private chat for members of the club where they can go and talk and discuss things and plan weekends, etc. But I said, hey, was anybody's all-sky camera running? And sure enough, somebody caught it. It wasn't as good, unfortunately, on the camera. It never is.
Sure.
But just the fact that they caught it and were able to capture that moment, I thought was really cool, because I was able to, screenshot it. And that's a memory of what the best one that I had was. So
yeah.
A little bit more about you personally. What originally got you into astronomy? How long have you been into astronomy? What got you into it, and those sorts of things?
Yeah, so as a kid, I was kind of interested in astronomy. I was always interested in sciences and things like that. So, but as I got older, I kind of lost interest in it for a while.
Yep.
And then I guess about 15 years ago, sitting at home one evening, just kind of bored, and grabbed my wife's digital SLR camera, took it out in the backyard on a tripod, pointed it up at the sky, and started doing 10-second exposures.
Yep.
And just to see kind of what I could get out of it. And out of just pure luck, I happened to be pointing up at Orion and captured parts of the Orion Nebula.
Yep.
And I was looking at it and just astonished at what I just took a picture of. Had no idea about anything like stacking or anything like that.
Well, I mean, how long ago was it? Did you say again?
This is about 15 years ago.
So yeah, I mean, there was no real community, as it were, like it is today. I mean, not to say there wasn't a community, but
there was one, but it wasn't nearly as active as today. There were still tools like Deep Sky Stacker that was available at the time. So nice free ways to stack images, but you had to know that stacking images was
even a thing, yeah. Which is
I
something
didn't
you wouldn't really
initially.
just stumble across it if you weren't looking, right?
And so, it was started with doing some Google searches of taking pictures of the night sky and things like that until, finally learned the terminology that I needed to search for.
Yeah.
And slowly but surely over the years, I've been, spending more and more money and more time in the hobby. And, it's something that I always tell people is, if you don't like having disposable income, get into astrophotography.
Yeah, you can say that. It's definitely not a cheap hobby,
because you combine all the expense of astronomy with all the expense of photography. So
and that's I got into photography first actually, and I was into birding early on.
Gotcha.
And then similar to you, one night I was just bored and went out with a tripod in the backyard, and it was actually a full moon that night. And I pointed my, cheap kit lens at it, the telephoto one, and started taking pictures. And then I set it down for quite a while. And I'm actually one of the, I feel like there was a big, giant boom in this hobby because of COVID.
Absolutely.
Obviously. And I am one of the people that bought their first telescope during the pandemic because I was so bored and couldn't go anywhere or do anything. And that's what actually brought me into the hobby personally.
Absolutely.
So, what would you say to someone who is new to astronomy or astrophotography and they're maybe considering joining their local club, but they're not really sure if they should get their feet wet? Maybe they're nervous. Maybe they only think it was a solo hobby before. How would you encourage them to at least go check it out?
So I would say that the great thing about joining a club is that you don't have to stumble around in the dark like I did.
Yeah.
When I first started getting into astronomy, I didn't even know what questions to ask.
Yeah.
And, being a member of the club, you can easily just sit down and chat with people. Mm-hmm. And there's something really powerful about that allows you to learn quickly, to look at different types of telescopes, learn different types of observing. That's you may find that looking through an eyepiece just doesn't do anything for you, and that you'd rather take pictures.
Yeah.
Or you may find that taking pictures is too much of a technical thing that you just don't care for, and you want to learn how to do sketches. All of these things are ways to do astronomy. You may decide that you're really interested in really faint nebulosity kind of things, or double stars, or planetary planets in the solar system, or things like that. Maybe you're a globular clusters kind of person, and until you know that, you don't really know what equipment to buy.
True,
because all of these things have different different
specialities. Yeah, for sure.
And so something that may be good for looking at the cloud formations on Jupiter isn't going to be all that great for looking at
the Orion Nebula.
The Orion Nebula, or any nebulosity.
For sure.
Because one of them you want something where you get really high magnification, that's very, very crisp, and one of them you want a light bucket that'll just soak up as much photons as it can. And so with a giant light bucket, you point that at Jupiter and you're going to ruin your night vision for the night.
Oh yeah. I've seen that 24-inch one stop down quite a bit to avoid blinding us.
Yeah. And even then it's still crazy.
Yeah.
Bright.
Oh yeah.
So different telescopes have different uses, and you really want to I would encourage you to join your local club and talk with local members about the different types of astronomy that can be out there and how you might want to pursue it, because
for sure
everybody does it differently.
And not for nothing, but for me personally, I'm 39 now, and the older I get, the harder it is to meet new friends. And this is like so true. It's true for me and my wife. Just meeting anyone, when you get a little bit older, it's harder to do. And I mean, the same could be said for, nowadays, even when you're younger, it's probably quite difficult to meet people. And I think there's something really special to being able to come down here and just talk to people who have the same interests as us. And I personally, I've already made several friends who I talk with in text message, and we plan to come down here together at times and those sorts of things. And that's something that I don't really feel like you can get anywhere else with too many other hobbies in such a specialized way. And, you know, it's funny that you mentioned about telescopes earlier, because one of the first things that I see people who are very new and maybe naive to how astronomy works, they say like, hey guys, I want a telescope and I want to look at galaxies and nebulas. What would be the good one to buy for that? And oftentimes they'll post along a picture of what they think might be the right telescope, and it'll be like an AVX with a ginormous high focal length telescope that, and let's be frank, an amateur probably has no business running a telescope like that, and it can ruin the hobby for them. So if you come down here and you get to talk to other people and see their equipment, it really can open your eyes to, you know, all the possibilities, and you don't got to really spend anything outside of, like you say, cheaper than Netflix subscription. And it gives you a lot of pathways forward, right?
Absolutely. And when it comes to, you know, telescopes, there's a lot of telescopes that we like to call hobby killers.
Yes.
That are really terrible optical systems, but they're cheap. And you'll also hear them referred to as department store telescopes.
Yeah.
Stuff that, you know, places like Sears and Montgomery Ward used to sell before, back when they were a thing. And, you know, but they're terrible telescopes. They wobble a lot. The eyepieces are sometimes just made of plastic instead of glass. Every time you go to touch the focuser, the whole thing wobbles and shakes for 10 seconds until it finally settles down. And so it makes it very difficult to focus things. And, you know, it's, those types of telescopes can very quickly, you know, frustrate somebody who's trying to get into the hobby. And then they realize that, you know, they just throw their hands up and say, "This isn't for me."
Yeah.
You know, I don't see how these people do it. You know, this is all crazy.
I could definitely see that easily happen. The first telescope I ever bought, I got kind of lucky. I bought it's a Celestron 130. I think it's called an Astro 5, but it's one of their tracking telescopes on an alt-az mount with eyepieces, etc. But I thought when I bought that, hey, I can use this for astrophotography, but no, it was not right. And unfortunately for me, I tried to, jerry-rig that to be an astrophotography scope before I went and met some astronomers. And then once I talked to them, I very quickly got on the right track and bought a nice equatorial mount to start with, and then kind of slowly added things on. So we talked earlier about this being a very expensive hobby. And what I would encourage people to do is just make sure that you research things properly before you spend any money. And one of the great things about joining a club is that you can come down and actually, see with your own two eyes what that kind of equipment is like. When we have star parties down here, that's one of the best times to come and check out different types of telescopes, right?
Absolutely. We can have dozens of people setting up their telescopes out here during a star party night. It's in South Carolina, unfortunately, the weather doesn't always cooperate with us. But when we have a nice clear night, especially in the wintertime when it gets dark nice and early, we will typically have 2 or 3 dozen people out here, members of the club that will come out and set up their telescopes. And there's very few duplicated telescopes.
Yeah.
There's, just all kinds of different telescopes and different designs and, for everything from, small refractors to Newtonians and classic Cassegrains and, even some more, esoteric ones like Mach-Newts and things like that will show up out here. And so you can see all kinds of different things from, fully manual with someone turning slow motion knobs to, fully automated computer controlled scopes.
And with that kind of info, you can really decide, what's for you,
Exactly. And our club members love to talk to other people about their equipment, and all you have to do is go up and ask and say, what are you looking at tonight?
Yep.
What are you imaging tonight? What can you tell me a little bit about your setup? I'm thinking about getting into something like this.
And talking shop is one of the funnest things we do.
And they will, immediately start, telling you all about it. And, it might be hard to get them to shut up. So
you can say that again. Yeah. What about your rig? I know your telescope's got an interesting story, right?
Yeah. So what I've got currently is a 100 millimeter TMB telescope, which is a one made by Thomas Mackelbach. He was a very well-known optical designer. He sadly passed away several years ago, but I came across the scope kind of by accident. APM still sells these designs brand new at about $5,000 a telescope for a 4-inch refractor.
Yeah,
it is a triplet, but in this case, I managed to get a really great deal on it because it came into the club on consignment.
Yep.
Somebody's family member had passed away, and it was theirs, and people just didn't know. What it was.
Yeah.
It was just a telescope.
That happens a lot.
And absolutely it does. And so, I kind of got lucky on that because there were no markings on the tube or anything like that.
So you had to really do your research to find out what it was.
Absolutely. I had to spend a lot of time on Google, even trying to track down the maker's mark that was on the lens cell.
Oh, wow. Like a sword, huh? Like a maker's mark on it.
And it was finally tracked that down to LZOS, which is a Russian optics maker. They made optics for Zeiss for many, many years during the Soviet Union days. And
very good glass.
Very, very good glass. They make the glass for most of Russia's space telescopes and spy satellites and things like that.
So very high quality.
Very high quality stuff. They're a very well-known optics manufacturer. And so happened to run across that, and then that kind of gave me the clue that I needed to track down the rest of the information about it. And it was one of those where got to do all that legwork and try to find the provenance of the scope itself, and
it just makes it that more special though. Now,
absolutely, and the serial number that was on it on the lens cell. Unfortunately, I couldn't find the original test paperwork for it. APM said that they didn't have that anymore.
Oh, really?
But
what a shame.
I sent an email to Marcus Ludes there, and he said that he didn't have anything from
still worth a try.
And but it was apparently one number off from Thomas Bach's personal telescope.
Really?
So it was apparently the same batch.
So he was likely tweaking everything perfectly before he got to yours, in fact.
So it was I think it's a really wonderful scope. I've done some great imaging with it, and some a lot of visual work with it as well.
Oh yeah,
and it's been a absolute blast. So
that's very cool.
Just being able to run across something like that on accident and get a great deal on it was amazing.
Yeah, you can't. I mean, that's kind of everybody's dream, right?
Yeah.
I have an 80 millimeter refractor. It's nothing special, but it gives me good quality images, and it's given me plenty of room to grow. And honestly, a small refractor is like A grade for somebody who's new to the hobby. You really can't go wrong there. You don't really have to mess with too much. You don't have to mess with collimation and those types of things. So I personally love refractors. I don't know if I'll ever be a reflector guy, to be honest. Maybe if I get like a Galaxy Killer one day and I just need that kind of aperture and size to get through. But what's your favorite telescope here at GHRO? Outside of your own, obviously. But if you had to pick a favorite, what would you say?
I'd say that my favorite one is our 8-inch refractor.
Oof.
It's a Alvin Clark & Sons refractor. Believe... it was manufactured somewhere in the early 1930s.
Wow.
So it's almost 100 years old now.
Yep.
It is a absolutely beautiful telescope.
It really is.
Lovingly restored by Gayle Riggsbee. When he got a hold of it, it was in less than great condition.
Okay.
And but Gayle, being the wonderful machinist and hobbyist that he is, did a wonderful job restoring it and getting it installed here at the observatory. And it is definitely one of my favorite telescope out here. It's on a fully manual mount.
Mm-hmm.
It is a tracking mount. We did install an electric motor on
Mm-hmm.
it that replaced the original gravity drive tracking system that was on it. So no more having to crank a weight up.
Oh yeah.
So we do have the electric motor on it for tracking, but there's no go-to capability or anything like that. It is just you have to use setting circles to find the objects you need or star hop. And it's a great way to just learn the sky on a, piece of history.
Yes.
Alvin Clark and Sons made the world's largest refractor several times, including the Yerkes 40-inch refractor.
Wow.
The telescope that Albert Einstein used at Princeton was an Alvin Clark.
Oh wow, I didn't know that.
It wasn't this Alvin Clark.
Yeah, but it was a Alvin Clark. Yeah.
They have a long storied history and of making some of the world's finest astronomy instruments. And the fact that we have one is really wonderful addition to our club. And it's just a piece of history that is really fun to use.
Oh yeah.
Because it's not just sitting in a museum.
Oh yeah,
It is
which
out
many
here.
are.
Yeah, it is out here to be used and
Mhm.
to be, and our club members can come out and use them anytime they want. So
I feel like that is what Alvin Clark would have wanted. I can't imagine too many people who design scopes would want 100 years later for it to be sitting in a museum. Obviously, if it's in really, terrible condition and can't be used, that's one thing. But for it to be restored, not only that, but it's one of the scopes that's actually just available for any club member to use after they train on it, right?
absolutely, it's we've got our 8-inch refractor, our 16-inch Cassegrain, and our 24-inch reflector that are open for club members to use anytime they want. Once you've received the training, you could come out and use it whenever you'd like.
That's super cool. I remember the last time I was at a star party, somebody was on the 24-inch reflector, and they were looking at the Eastern Veil Nebula. And I had imaged the Eastern Veil Nebula several times, but I had never seen it through that powerful of a scope. And I thought to myself, let's go take a look. I was absolutely blown away at the quality, the detail, and that's something that let's face it, we're never going to have something like that in our backyard. But in a different way, we do have it in our backyard if we're just willing to, drive an hour down the road for someone like me.
Absolutely.
And that's incredible to me, just the access that you get to all the different gear here and everything. And one thing that I talked about before in an episode where we talked about joining your local astronomy club is just the importance of really getting to know members on site and kind of getting, FaceTime with people like yourself and other members of the club. I would encourage everybody, to come down a few times. Don't be disappointed if you come out on night number 1 and you're like, hey, can I jump on the $200,000, spend a little bit of time, let people know you, and then more doors are going to open to you. And things like, if somebody does have gear for sale and you're looking to buy a telescope, you're a lot more apt to hear about something like that if you're, more involved with the club. So, definitely spend time at your club if you join and make sure, that you're keeping your ears open, particularly if you're looking for some equipment or what have you. So, do you have any advice for astrophotographers, whether they be new or experienced in the hobby?
So advice for astrophotographers, I would say practice.
Practice.
That's
Yep.
really the only advice I can give because, while I like the images that I produce, I am far from an expert in astrophotography.
Same.
We've got some club members that I would put up against anybody on the planet as far as their imaging and processing techniques. But I am not one of those people.
Yes.
Typically, whenever I do processing of my astrophotography is, outside of stacking, because that's just set it up and walk away a few hours later. Outside of stacking, I will probably spend 2 to 3 hours max processing my images, which is,
I would say that's about average for a PixInsight type session for me. So,
So I'm not the kind of guy that's going to spend, 12 hours,
Oh,
14 hours, 40 hours processing one image and, in lots of different ways and things like that. I get it to where it's good enough for me and I'm happy with it.
Same. That's what I do too.
But, if you're interested in that, I definitely recommend that you reach out to somebody either in your club with it that you have seen their images and you want to learn how to process like them, or on online forums like Cloudy Nights and places like that where you can really kind of learn some of the more advanced techniques for processing. But the biggest thing, when it comes to astrophotography is honestly patience and time.
Yeah.
There's really no substitute for integration time. Finding ways to get as many photons as you can.
Oh yeah, gather the data.
Because you can run all the different types of denoising and things like that, but there's really no substitute for just extra integration time.
That is so true, and I'll never forget the first time I made a trip to a Bortle 1 site, and I took my first 3-minute image of the Lagoon and Trifid Nebula. They were framed up, and I was waiting for it to load up on my tablet screen, and just that first image, 1 3-minute exposure. It instantly, I'm talking like unprocessed, just what ASI Air put up on the screen. It blew out everything I'd taken in the last 2 years just because it's so dark out there and I was able to quickly gather so much light. My jaw dropped. So do you have any rules of thumb for your integration time? I'm curious about this because there's a number that I have in my mind that at a minimum, I want to shoot for this much. Before I say, okay, that's good enough. And it might be surprisingly low. I don't know what you're going to say.
Yeah.
But what's your general rule of thumb on any given object?
So, it has changed over the years.
Mm-hmm.
Before I built my own observatory.
Okay. Fair.
I would usually go for, try to get 6 to 8 hours of integration time. A night's worth.
Yep.
Occasionally for some objects I would do 2 nights.
Okay.
But most of the time it was 1 night, and whatever I could get was what I got.
Yep.
After I built my own observatory and set it up for remote access, then
that changes things a bit.
All of a sudden I was able to go much, much longer. And, at that point I really started going for 40 to 50 hours.
Oh, wow. Okay, so that's a lot of integration time.
Because it was easy.
Yeah, oh yeah, for sure.
I have my system set up so that it was fully automated.
Okay.
I could set up the targets that I wanted to image, and when the weather was good, the roof would automatically open, the telescope would do its alignment, it would automatically start taking pictures with nothing at all from me at all.
Yeah.
Just all I had to do was check and make sure that it was, everything was operating well. And then, check the data a few days later. And if clouds came in, it would close the roof. And then at 2 a.m., if the clouds went away, it would open back up and start imaging again.
So you fully automated everything.
Yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And so it was, really great. And an easy way to just soak up the light. And so I didn't have to settle for 8 hours of integration time anymore. I could just let it run. And there were times when I would forget that I was imaging a target, and I'd come back and look and say, "Oh wow, I've got 110 hours on this."
Wow. Oh man, that's a happy mistake. I love it.
Sure. And oh yeah, I need to change targets. That's way too much. It's going to take me 8 hours just to stack it.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So
I stacked something the other day. I had my.
I'll take first world problems.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. I had my R7 out the other night, and I normally shoot with a ASI 294 or MC Pro, but I had my R7. I was just having fun. I had my star tracker out, my little Sky Guider Pro, and I put 50 mil on it and pointed it at Orion. And I was kind of blown away by the size of the raw files compared to my astronomy camera. And when I went to actually go stack it all in PixInsight, it was 100 lights. That was it. I was just taking a wide field shot of Orion. And man, it was 100 gigabytes of data by the time I added in calibration frames. What kind of sizes do you deal with if you've got 110 hours of exposure?
I think I was looking at around a terabyte.
Wow.
So
to process one full image file.
Yeah. And so, and that's kind of, yeah, it was a lot of data.
Yeah. Did that become a problem at any point? Do you have like too much data? I've heard of people saying this that have their own observatories that like it becomes almost an issue where it's like I have too much data, I can't process it all.
Yeah, so it really comes down to because I'm a software engineer by trade and have been in computer technology for a long time. I have some nice file server set up at home.
Okay.
With it's got 48 terabytes of space on it.
Okay, all right.
So I have a easy way to just kind of store everything.
Yeah, for sure.
And then my finished images I will back up somewhere offsite.
Oh yeah, for
like
sure.
That. But all the raw data I usually don't. Just because it's expensive.
Oh yeah, it's very expensive to hold data for sure online.
But yeah, so setting up a good good way to store that amount of data is kind of crucial. Luckily, hard drive prices have been coming down significantly.
A lot.
It's easy to find a single hard drive that'll hold 16 terabytes.
So. Oh yeah, for sure.
Which was unheard of just a few years ago. So.
Right? Oh man, when we look at the other revolution that's happened, other than computers getting smaller and cheaper in the last 20 years, we've seen like a complete upending in astrophotography, right? I mean, compared to back in the 90s, what was it? CMOS cameras that were being used?
The
CCD cameras, rather. I'm sorry.
CMOS is primary now.
What we currently use now. Did you experience any of that CCD camera age? And
yeah, so I actually had a couple of CCD cameras.
Okay.
My first dedicated astrophotography camera was based on one of the Kodak CCD chips, and unfortunately, the the camera itself and the firmware for it was extremely buggy, and so I didn't have a lot of great success with that camera. But that was my first cooled camera was that CCD, and the Kodak chip itself was really nice as long as I could get the camera itself to work.
Get it working. Yeah, that's half the battle.
But after that, I really kind of quickly got into CMOS cameras.
Oh yeah,
the ASI 1600 was the game changer in the hobby that brought a relatively inexpensive camera that was cooled, to a lot of people. Suddenly you could have a $1,000 camera that was, that was a cooled camera, decent size sensor. It had a 4/3 sensor on it.
Yeah, 4/3 on the 1600.
And it was just a great little setup. And since then, it's exploded after that. So.
Truly, it has. I mean, every year these new products are coming out, and like the latest thing is smart telescopes, which are starting to become they're everywhere. And what I said in my prior episode for beginners is I actually said avoid the smart telescope. I feel like it really takes a lot of the joy out of the process. So we actually have a training session that we're doing here today at Gayle Riggsbee. And Rick, I know you need to get to your job. However, we would love to have you back on the show one day soon. I know that you and your friend Jeff actually, you started a company, right?
Absolutely. We started a company called Dark Dragons Astronomy where we sell some observatory control systems. Where I mentioned earlier that I kind of automated all of my setup.
Yes.
Well, those are the kind of things that we sell is some hardware and software that allows you to do that.
So that's an entire other discussion that I definitely want to have with you soon.
Okay.
So we'll definitely set that up, and that's something that we can look forward to, and the listeners can also look forward to in the future. So we'll definitely have to have you and Jeff back on, and we can talk about what all that entails and all the problems that it solves, and just how you can automate all those things, because that's something I'm very interested in personally as well. So
absolutely.
I really appreciate your time today, man. It's been great talking to you. Do you have any final words you'd like to say before we sign off?
You can get outside and look up.
Definitely.
It's astronomy is a great hobby, and You don't even have to wait till nighttime. You can see some of the planets during the day. You can see the moon during the day. You can see the sun.
Yep.
A nice solar telescope is a great addition to anybody.
We have one here.
So we do. We do. But yeah, get outside and look up.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Rick. We really appreciate it, man. Appreciate everybody tuning in this week to the Astrocast. I'm your host, Rue. We'll be back next week. Thanks so much for joining us today. Oh, we're doing this again, are we? Well, you're going to hear my wife working out in the background probably. But you really want that podcast suggestion, don't you? I'm going to do a twofer for you this week. Not only is it a podcast, but it is an awesome YouTube channel. And it's called The Y-Files. Operation Podcast, or just go to YouTube and check out The Y-Files. Clear skies.